Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to CEO Evolution. I have Ran Eliasaf here with me today, the founder and managing partner of the Northwind Group. Ran, thanks for coming out today.
Thank you,
Pleasure
Mark.
to have you here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure speaking
honor.
with you virtually here.
Yeah, looking forward to this session. So the CEO Evolution series is an annual seminar series that takes place in several regions where Citron Recruitment operates. The CEO Evolution series aims to identify and recognize those CEOs and leaders who have risen to the top and evolved as industry leaders. That's you, Ran. This annual event brings together some of the most notable and most dynamic CEOs to share their experiences, strategies, and best practices to help others gain insight into becoming successful leaders. Just to give a little background on Citron Recruitment before we get into Northwind, Citron Recruitment is one of the nation's largest professional service firms, helping companies and high net worth individuals find smart solutions. Whether your operations and assets are located around the corner or across the globe, we can provide new perspective on strategies that will help you achieve your short and long-term goals. Our daily mission is to enhance the business and personal lives of our clients through our service, guidance, and enthusiasms for building long-standing relationships. We're dedicated to providing clients with an objective viewpoint and insightful advice on whatever challenges they bring to the table. Finding innovative solutions is what drives our professionals and helps our clients succeed. Again, I'm Mark Mindick. I lead the real estate group, and it's a pleasure to have known Ran for at least 10 years. Ran, talk to our group here a little bit about Northwind and tell us what Northwind is about.
Sure. Before we start, again, it's a pleasure being here, and it's an honor. I've been, I think, a client of Citron for over a decade now. And Mark, you've been there for us in many occasions, and really appreciate the relationship. So thank you for inviting me to join here today. You're
welcome. A true pleasure.
So Northwind Group, today we're a real estate private equity firm. We're based here in Manhattan, as you can see. We manage close to $3 billion. Our main focus right now is in our credit strategy. We currently manage 3 debt funds, 2 real estate debt funds that are focused on New York bridge lending mostly. We do lend in other markets, and then a healthcare focused debt fund that provides mezzanine loans on healthcare, senior housing, and skilled nursing properties across the nation. We also own and operate properties still in our legacy portfolio, but our main focus in the last 6 years has been lending, and that's where we've been most active. We basically took all the experience and knowledge we've gained as an owner, as an operator, as an equity investor, and transitioned that knowledge into being what we believe is a very good and flexible capital provider and lender to other sponsors and operators.
Great, Ran. You guys are definitely extremely unique, and your story is very, very unique. And that's one of the reasons why you were selected here, aside from being an amazing CEO. And we'll get into that soon as to how you operate within your organization. But your story is incredible. And can you talk to us and maybe take a tour for our viewers and our listeners about how this all started? Maybe take us back to your days in Israel. Maybe you can even get back into the days of the army or professional surfing, and then take us through and talk to us as to how you arrived here as a leader in the U.S. real estate market.
Thanks. Well, I'll try to keep it short. We only have less than, we wanted to get this done in less than an hour, right?
Right.
So I was born and raised in Israel. My father was a general in the Israeli Air Force, and I was an army brat. We moved around between Air Force bases. Until 8th grade, I switched 10 places, 10 houses, which means you have to create new friends and new people. And you know, I think I tried to get the positive parts out of moving around all the time. We actually also lived in Boston a couple of years. That's where I got acquainted. In the 6th and 7th grade, that's where I really got acquainted to the U.S. and I had a really positive experience. And I think back then I already knew that I want to get back here and do something. But Israel called, and obviously the national service in Israel called. Being the son of a general, there was no doubt I'm going to do something meaningful in the armed forces. And I went to the Naval Academy, which was a 2-year program, became a naval officer, got my first command in May 2000. was a commander of a ship, and then went back to the Naval Academy as a team leader and instructor, and did over 6 years in total in active combat duties in the Israeli Navy.
Wow.
After that, I kind of needed a break.
Uh-huh.
And instead of going into school, I decided to take a year off. As you mentioned, I'm big into surfing. I always surfed, no matter where we lived, even when we lived in the middle of the desert. I found a way to convince my father to let's get in the car and let's go surfing in south of Israel or wherever it is. And I always surfed, always windsurfed and kite surfed when that sport picked up. And then when I finished the naval service, I said, okay, I'm going to take a year off. I'm not going to do a typical backpacking trip. I'm just going to go to one place and surf and kite surf. And that's where I did. I actually lived in the Dominican Republic. I ended up opening up a surfing school there,
Wow.
working as a bartender. And I think I was making maybe $150 a week, but I was spending $100. So cash flow positive with a pretty good margin.
That's the bottom line.
But after a year living as an ultimate beach bum, the brain stopped kind of being, I couldn't finish a book properly, and I was, I met other people who were much older that chose that life and stayed, in the surfing life, and I said, okay, that's not for me. So I went back to Israel, went into law school, and very fast in my first year of law school, realized I'm not going to be an attorney, but I like that education. It gave me really good footing, especially, contract law. And at that time I was, 26 almost. And I realized, okay, I'm going to finish the law degree when I'm almost 30 and have zero work experience. I mean, I have a lot of life experience and the Navy definitely gave me a lot in what it means to lead and take charge and make decisions under stress. But I didn't want to finish my law degree without having any real work experience. So I was able, through my sister and my brother-in-law, I met this person who was an attorney, and he represented a lot of wealthy families from South Africa, actually, who invested in real estate. And he took me along initially as his chauffeur / secretary. And he taught me the ropes, and he taught me real estate and deal making. And unfortunately, he passed away very suddenly at the age of 55. After I was with him for almost 2 years, and active bacteria in the lungs and deteriorated very fast. And when he passed away, during his shiva, a lot of his clients started talking to me and needed, help with certain stuff. So I helped them along, and one of them introduced me to his family office. They later invited me to join, and I became their real estate guy, so to speak. This was 2007. And then, I formed Northwind. The name Northwind is because it's the best wind in Israel to surf and windsurf and kite surf. That's the reason. Initially, it was my private company that held a stake in the fund that we formed in Israel. We raised a little bit of money just before the financial crisis in 2008. And we had a fund set up, but we didn't do any deals before the financial crisis, out of luck, pure luck.
Right.
I actually went, I remember the first deal, we flew to LA, looked at the ground up condo deal, and at the end of 2007, if we had done that deal, we probably would have lost all the money. And then when the financial crisis hit, we were liquid and we had funds at a time that was, serious liquidity crunch. So we started investing. We teamed up with a local partner and we bought distressed debt, predominantly on grocery anchored shopping centers in the Southeast. And that was the beginning of my foray into really doing real estate transactions in the US. I was flying back and forth.
I remember that. Let me ask you, Ran, why did you pick the US? Coming from Israel, why was it US versus any other market that was out there at the time?
I think I was already inclined to the US because I lived here for 2 years as a child. And even though I was very young, at the 6th and 7th grade, my father went to school at Harvard, and I got to hear and hear the lingo. And we had a really amazing hosting family that hosted us there that actually were in great contact until today. And they're actually investing with me until this date. And they're a big, real estate developer in the Boston area. So I don't know, I was always driven to
Right.
the US. I always had a feeling that, this is the place you make it. That was my thoughts, right? As a young guy, 24, 25, my perception was, if you want to make it, it's the US. It's not Europe. It's not Asia. That was for me. And I spoke the language. I understood the language. I had a decent English for somebody who was born and raised in Israel. And it was just very, you know,
Listen, you got a good flavor right
comfortable.
away, Ran.
Very comfortable.
I was born in Boston too, so you got the right flavor from the Bostonian.
Yeah,
So
yeah, Brooklyn.
that's
I lived in
where it all
Brooklyn.
worked.
I lived
Yeah,
in Brooklyn.
exactly. So did you move your whole family to the US at that point in time?
So I got married, and we had our first child, and it was, when we was born in Israel, and I was flying back and forth, and I said, okay, this is not the quality of life I envision, and I always imagined and saw myself as a very active father and parent, and I want to be involved in my children's life, and you know, you know, work is important, but family is more important to me. So I spoke with my wife, and she was willing at the time to leave her career. She had a very successful career there, and we moved here when my son was 1 year old. We had two daughters that were born here already, and it's been over 10 years ago now. So yeah, it was not an easy decision to move and to relocate and to basically start fresh. And the business was not big at the time when we made the decision. It was, we had
Yeah.
a handful of transactions, pretty small, and it was a big bet. It was a transition time because I sold out of the kind of grocery anchored shopping center business. So Northwind sold all its stake in that business to the other partners that we had. So I made initial capital, what I felt at the time was a lot, it seemed like a lot of money. And so it was easier making that decision then, honestly, because we had some egg nest that the nest eggs that we said, okay, we can bank on it. But it was still moving to a new country, new language, and not knowing exactly what will happen. This was, end of 2012. So
I remember like it was yesterday. We were in a conference room and you had that oak tag. I remember we were at 529 Fifth Avenue and you were there oak tagging out all the different investments. And that was probably about then. So this is actually interesting for me too. But let me ask you a question before we get into the crux of things as to your amazing story and of Northwind, which we're going to get to in a minute. How important was it for you that you moved here, as opposed to many people back then? I've dealt with a lot of people internationally that just, stayed abroad, operated here, traveled back and forth. You obviously picked yourself up, got here. And I remember that about you. And that's probably one of your reasons for your super success. But how important was that? Talk to us a little bit.
It was super critical because I didn't want to be a guy that invests in somebody else's deal, which is really what we were doing early on, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with it, and being an asset manager and kind of investing. But I was still young. I think I am still young, but I was then definitely young, and I wanted to be here on the ground, in the properties day in, day out. We actually put all the first deals we did, we put our office in those properties and we managed them hands-on. And that was my belief that if I want to do it and I want to make sure I succeed, I need to be here full time and not visit in and out and, know every street, know every property, who owns it, who sold it, who's the lender. And I used to walk down the streets and tell the stories. Okay, that building, I know who bought it. They paid this and this. They got a mortgage from that bank, and it's coming to and you learn the streets. And in New York, it's relatively easy. I mean, you can deploy a lot of capital in New York, and still, it's you can see all the properties in less than an hour taking a subway. When we were buying properties in the Southeast, you needed a plane in 3 days to see all the properties. So I knew I'm going to move to New York, and I knew I want to do business here in New York.
So now that we learned about your background, how you got here, and how you delved and jumped right in here to start your business and to start Northwind, take us through Northwind a little bit. And I think your story is fantastic, and I think it's very important for all of our viewers to hear as well, and our CEOs out there, as to how you built this. I know it's specifically on real estate, and I'm a little biased to real estate as well, given that's a lot of what I do. But it's interesting about, when you started Northwind, you started in one way. You started it mainly, again, I don't want to steal your thunder, but through buying office buildings, right? Then you went into healthcare, and then on the finance side, and then you turned back around. Very interesting and very unique. But take us back from when you founded Northwind as to what got you intrigued to start in that, to go into the office sector directly when you found the Northwind, and take us through, the steps along the way as to how you built the company.
I think the story of Northwind has been a story of constant evolution and constantly asking ourselves, are we doing the right thing? Does it make sense? Is there something else we should be doing? And when I moved here, to answer your question, my head was, okay, I'm going to be a developer. I want to build, I want to buy buildings, I want to touch them, I want to, it was comprised of ego. There was a lot of ego, I think, in that decision. And also, that's what I kind of knew, because it was familiar. And I did that. And the first deals we've done in New York were really ground up development, condo conversion, very complicated executions. And some of them were very successful, but not all of them. And I've, like many people, I've learned the most from the deals that were not successful and trying to analyze what we did wrong. And what really changed in my head was, I think in the first few years, I still had my army mentality on. And the army mentality is you stick to the mission, you complete the mission. I just didn't realize that the mission was, to make good investments and make money. The mission in my head was to complete the building, right? That was the mission. You complete the building, you build it out, you do it the best way possible, and then it will succeed. And unfortunately, in the investment world, it doesn't work like that. It's not necessarily the best looking building or the one that's been built with the most passion. That it's making good investment decisions and making, good risk adjusted returns. And what I started realizing is that even though doing development is very exciting on a personal level, the risk adjusted return, especially in New York, especially in those years, in 2011-12, it made sense. We bought land and we built ground up and we bought buildings and we converted them, and it made sense. The returns we were making versus the risk we were taking. But 2014, if you remember, land prices got to a place where, a piece of land used to be $200 a foot, then it's suddenly $500 a foot. And the margins were eroded, and getting projects done got so complicated. Construction costs went up and margins went down. So I just said, you know what, the risk adjusted return doing development in New York, this is 2014, doesn't make sense anymore for me. And we said, even though I love it and I enjoy it, and it's, you feel you're creating something, and then it's there and it's probably going to be there for 100 years. There's a lot of reasons why being a real estate developer is very meaningful.
Sure.
I made a decision, you know what, it's not the right place for us to be in, and it's not where we want to put our money and our investors' money. And we shifted. That was the first evolution. We shifted to income producing value add office, right? That's when we bought our first office building in 2014, and multifamily. And we had a pretty good run between 2014 to 2017 when we bought those properties, like 40 Exchange Place, 66 Pearl, 7 Hanover, which was the largest equity deal we've done. Together with
that was a very impressive deal. Yeah, I remember that.
We did with we have to give credit to GFP, the Growl family, and TPG, who came into that deal. But in 2017, after we signed the contract on that building, it was a 1 million square feet office building we bought from Guardian Life. Again, it stopped making sense, and that's when we shifted to lending, because we said, okay, we have all this knowledge now we've gained. It doesn't make sense to buy for us anymore, and we started lending. And lending really proven to be, for us, the right place to be in the last 6 years, where the returns have justified the risks that we've taken. And unfortunately, in the equity world, it's hasn't been as successful for a lot of different players.
Right.
The evolution to healthcare happened in 2016. Happened almost by mistake. Honestly, we signed a contract to buy a building in the Upper West Side. You know that building very well.
Sure.
On 74 in West End. And our initial plan was to convert it to residential for sale condos. And then we were approached by a few assisted living operators that kind of hinted that maybe doing assisted living, it was an assisted living in the past, that might be the best and highest use. And we did some market studies, and we went and did that business plan. We got a loan from KeyBank to do that building, and we developed a relationship with KeyBank that later brought us our first deal outside New York. We bought an 8-property portfolio in Ohio that we still own to date. And the relationship with the bank that specifically also led to additional business. And we've always been very big about trying to develop as many relationships as we can with our peers, with our colleagues, with our banks, and deal flow comes from all sorts of interesting places.
Do you have any regrets building your company? Any large regrets or anything you feel like you missed out on going through this, or did that not make a difference and you were just so focused on what you were trying to do?
My biggest
looking back?
regrets were actually deals that we had the option to exit, and we didn't take it. And there were certain deals, especially in the development world, where the market was so booming. We bought the land in around 2012 at a very good price. 2 years later, somebody offered us to sell it at double, and we said no, we're going to build it. That's what I was referring to in my head earlier, to the finish the mission. And the mission was, okay, build the building, but you just got an offer to make 2x. I should have taken it.
Right.
And leaving money on the table is fine, and it's fine letting somebody else win and make, and you don't have to squeeze the lemon all the way to the end. And that's one of my lessons. And probably another, I wouldn't call it regret, but it's admitting sooner to yourself when you're wrong, right? And learning that I don't know. I now can say very openly, I don't know everything. There's a lot of stuff I still need to learn. But when I was young, it was tougher to admit it. And I was here to gobble up the world, and I want to make deals, and I want to be successful. And it's very hard to admit to yourself that you don't know everything, and you still have a lot to learn. Now I think I'm much more aware of the weaknesses and the knowledge gaps, and I'm much more concerned of what I don't know, or I should say what I don't know that I don't know, right? The unknown unknowns.
Right.
Those are the biggest risks.
I think it's the kids that do it to us too, by the way. My kids do it to me. I'm sure your kids do it too. We realize how much we don't know about them. So it's like, okay, so I probably don't know about other things as well. That's interesting. Let's talk about the organization that you built, okay? Because you built a beautiful organization over 10 plus years. And obviously I've seen it from just you and a couple of people to where you are now, with very, very deep bench and industry specialists all over running your different businesses with you. But take us on a walk, and take our viewers on a walk through how that came about. Was there any method to the madness of how you got to where you are? And frankly, pretty quickly to build a nice, sound organization. A lot of people do deals and just get deals done, but you built the company. So talk to us about that and how that evolved.
So I gotta tell you, my if you want to call it my kind of management philosophy or leadership philosophy, was really engraved into me in the Navy. I was a commander of a very relatively small ship, which we all lived together. And even though you're the commander, we make the food together with the team, and when in the company, translating into the company, I try to lead with the sense that everybody has an equal voice, and I want to hear everybody, even if it's an analyst that just joined the team yesterday. I want to hear his thoughts, and if he thinks we're making a mistake or he sees something, he should say it. And I try to encourage everyone on my team to speak and to have an open discussion mentality. It's not easy. I'm a very as you can see, I'm very a live person, right, and adamant, and I have strong convictions, but having everybody in the team, share their thoughts, have their voice heard, I think is very important. And even to this day, when we're much larger, I mean, we started the company, I was the only employee. Then we had a tiny office, 2 other people with me, and now we have 2 offices, one in Manhattan, one in Cleveland. We're 25 people, still not a huge organization, but it's it's much larger than what it was. The second thing, which is very tough to me, and I'm still working on it, but is very important, is learning to delegate and learning to let other people lead. And I think that's when I made that change probably 4 years ago, making the decision that I want to bring in additional people that are going to be partners, either evolving into a partner's role or becoming one or joining as one. That was probably the best decision I've made. There's only so much one person can do, even in a real estate world where it's all, funnel gets through, there's so much to get done. So I think one of the reasons the company was able to grow so fast in the last 4 years is the fact that there's additional high quality people in the company leading in the various activities, in the debt funds, in the healthcare space, in our accounting team. And it's great to have, talent. Talent is so important, right?
Absolutely. Talent is where it's all at and what it's about. Talk to us, just digressing for a second, and talking about real estate, because that's your business a little bit. I think our viewers will also want to hear your opinion on the current markets as to where we're at in the cycle now. Obviously, you came into the business in a unique time back in, like you said, in 2008, and then we had a very interesting market throughout the recessionary times back in 2009 and 10, and then where are we holding now? Obviously, you took your company through COVID, but where are we holding now? What's your view on the current market?
It's very different than 2008. 2008 was a liquidity crunch, right? Liquidity was sucked out of the market, and banks were, fragile, and corporates, balance sheets were shuttered, and real distress. This feels and looks like a liquid recession, right? There is this looming recession. We're seeing, economic activity go down. There's definitely less deals happening ever since rates went up, but there's still so much liquidity out there. And that's why it's very different. The second difference for us, from a personal note, I came into 2008 with zero legacy portfolio, so it's much easier to buy when you have no existing portfolio to manage. Luckily, our portfolio right now is in very good hands and in a very good position. But still, companies first, when interest rates spike to where they are right now, everybody's first focused on their current portfolio and managing and making sure that it's on sound ground. And it's harder to do deals, especially for buyers. I mean, take multifamily, right? Considered one of the safest asset classes in the industry in real estate. Cap rates haven't really moved up yet, but if you want to get a loan on a new multifamily property, it's going to be pretty expensive.
Yeah, good luck.
Right? So we're seeing a lot of buyers saying, you know what, I'm going to close all cash. I'm going to close all cash and I'll wait it out. A lot of family offices are going there. But to your question, what we're seeing right now is reduced activity. There's less deals happening almost across all sectors, from multifamily to condos to office to hotel. But a lot of the underlying data is pretty strong. And we're mostly focused on New York City in our debt funds. So in New York City, in the last 3 years, there hasn't been really a lot of new supply being added. Nobody really started a brand new project from the ground up in 2021, right?
Right.
All the stuff we're seeing built is stuff that's dating COVID, most of it, and just being finished now. So if you look at the supply side of let's talk about residential, not a lot of new condos. That's why even though activity is going down, you're not seeing prices go down that much yet. I think they're going to go down a bit. They're probably going to go down 10, 15%, but they're not going to go down 30, 40, 50% because there's not a lot of new supply being created. And in the rental side, multifamily, since 421A kind of evaporated, you haven't seen a lot of multifamily being built. That's why we're seeing rents at almost all-time high. And usually, there's the classic equation, is it cheaper to rent or to buy? And you would assume that now with interest rates so high, it would be cheaper to rent, but rents are so high also. And the problem, in my view, is not interest rates. The problem is supply constraint. And if the city doesn't solve it, it doesn't create a lot of new housing. Doesn't matter if it's for sale, condo, or rentals. you're not going to see a huge drop in pricing because there's still a lot of demand.
Right, so you made some big plays in office, obviously, like you just took us through. Let's talk about office a little bit, and specifically in gateway markets. I guess we could talk about New York. It's obviously where you're active. What's your perspective on office in New York, and is that in your playbook at all to make a play, get back into that?
Personally, I think the pendulum has swung too much to the other side on office, right? It became a four-letter word. Nobody wants to touch it. Nobody wants to finance it or to buy it. And I think the move has been too aggressive. I think there's going to be very interesting opportunities in office. Office will find a new equilibrium. It's going to take time. It's not going to happen in a year. First, we're going to see a wave of conversions. We're going to see a wave of office buildings being converted to residential. It's already happening. We know of a few very large scale projects that are already happening that converting, you know, large office buildings, millions of square feet to resi. So that's going to help. That's going to take a bit of the supply down. Second thing, you're going to see over time return to office. Right now, it's only the A+ that are doing pretty well. You know, the brand new shiny buildings, Hudson Yards or in Midtown, and you're seeing the B class and the C class kind of suffering. It's going to probably be the trend for 2023. It's not going to be, there's not going to be great news for the office space for B class and C class office buildings in 2023, not just in New York, probably in every major gateway city, but eventually will come back. You know, we spoke about building teams. I do not understand how you can build a long-term team that's growing and doing it remotely or doing it from 2 days a week in the office. I don't think it works. And I think a lot of the CEOs will say the same thing. But a lot of larger companies, you know, right now have to appease their employees and allow it. Longer term, it's not going to succeed. You know, longer term to grow, I mean, who's going to get the promotion? The guy working from home or the guy coming from the office? Eventually, we're all humans. Eventually, psychology will kick in. People who are not in the office will be gradually left out of the inner circle. And as more CEOs come back, as more leaders come back, we're going to see a bigger move to the office. But again, it's going to take a while.
Right. But
the new norm will be 3 to 4 days. You're not going to see, you're never going to see Monday to Friday full time. I don't think that's coming back in the near future, but you're going to see more and more companies pivot back to 3 and 4 days in the office.
So what advice can you give for entrepreneurs out there looking to make a career, specifically, I guess, in real estate? Is it advice coming from you as, you know, you built a sound organization? What's more important? Is it the actual business, you know, and either buying deals or creating new business, new segments of business, or creating that organization? Or do you feel it has to get done together at the same time? What should people focus on? You know, and I think coming from you as to what you did is a very important perspective for our listeners.
I'll tell you what I've learned, especially when you're starting out. You know, it's hard to support yourself, and you don't have a lot of, you know, excess cash, and you need to do deals, right? When people start on this business, they need to do deals in order to stay afloat. And what I've learned is the good deals, you will always find capital for them. And my advice would be, don't be afraid to go after larger deals. It's sometimes actually easier to finance and get capital to do a larger deal than it is to do a smaller one. And I see a lot of, you know, developers and newcomers to the business starting out with, you know, $1 million deals, $5 million deals, and saying, no, I'm not going to do a 10, 20, 30, or 100 because I don't have the capital. And my advice to them when they ask is, you'll be surprised that doing a $30 million deal is sometimes easier than doing a $3 million deal. You have more choice of banks, and you have more interested capital partners. And the question you need to ask yourself, is it a good deal? Because if it's a good deal, you will get the capital. And sometimes the reason people are struggling to get those deals done is not because of the size, it's because the deal is not just good enough. And it's very hard to admit that to yourself, that it's not a great deal. Why do you do that deal? Well, it's what came to my plate. That's why I'm doing it. That's a lot of time the response. And that's not a good response. You really need to know you're doing a good deal because you're investing your money, you're investing other people's money, and making sure the deal is underwritten soundly and the fundamentals are good is the most important. The size doesn't matter. so to speak.
Right. Can you talk to us a
And
little
the second
bit?
thing I'll say is listen if the music has changed. Try to figure out, because don't keep doing the same thing you've done. People sometimes, we're all creatures of comfort. You get used to a certain asset class and certain business plan, and it's like a cookie cutter, right? You can do it over, but sometimes what made sense a year ago doesn't, or a month ago doesn't make sense anymore. And try and see if the market changed, if something changed, and maybe you should do something else. And that's really what we did all the time, asking us that question: is what we're doing, is it make sense, or should we be doing something else that makes more sense?
So that's a great segue into my next question. Talk to us a little bit. I know that you currently have a fund structure now. That changed, right? In the beginning, it wasn't always like that. You operated more on a syndication basis, and then you started your funds. That was obviously a big change for you guys, and something more difficult on the onset, but obviously easier down the road. Talk to us about that, and about your funds, about your new structure, about how you look at things, and how that has helped you grow your business.
Transition to a fund structure was not a target. It wasn't the goal. It just made sense operationally and tax wise. When we started doing debt, initially we did the debt deals, one-off, same way as we did the equity transactions, and then we realized we're not doing the best optimal tax structure every time we do a deal, because you do a relatively smaller loan, you're not going to build a whole complicated tax structure, as you know, for a relatively small transaction. So what drove the transition into a fund structure was optimizing tax, and also not driving our investors crazy every few weeks with a capital call and hey, here's this deal, here's that deal, do you want to do it, and just saying, okay, this is the theme, this is where we're going to invest. We created a very clear box. So funds could be structured in a lot of different ways. Putting the actual tax structure aside, we created a very clear box of, if you're investing in our fund, you know what you're going to get. It's not a black hole that you could find yourself in deals in India and debt, equity, whatever. It's a very clear defined box, and our investors felt very comfortable, I think, that they know what they're going to get even before the fund started making actual investments. So I think that was important, and it enabled us to grow in the debt space. I think close-ended funds, which is the way we're structured, is probably the preferred way to do debt investments, because you have a committed pool of capital, you know what it is, you don't have to worry about drawdowns like open-ended funds. Sometimes, we just saw Blackstone, right? When an open-ended fund, you can get requests to get out from LPs, and then you have to gate it or stop it, and it could be complicated. So for us, the close-ended fund structure made the most sense for our debt investments.
Right. That's the talk of the day, is the B REITs and Blackstone and Starwood and all those redemption requests and stuff, which are, from my perspective, are going to change the market a little bit.
It makes sense. I mean, we're in a different world right now. You can put your money in the bank and get what, 4 or 5%.
Yep. Almost.
Almost. Suddenly, risk-free, or what perceived as risk-free, you can buy, the treasuries and get, over 4%, and you have real alternatives. And we now live in a world that capital has a price, which was not the case in the last almost a decade, right?
Right. Exactly. So we spoke a lot about where you came from, how you started, great background, great upbringing, and how you've created success and wealth. But more importantly, and ultimately, the goal, one of the goals of success is giving back, is philanthropy. And I know firsthand that you've been involved in several different initiatives from a philanthropic perspective. Can you share with our listeners today some examples, some ideas, and more importantly, your vision about it, and about how important it is, and how important it is to you and your family?
So it's very important for us, and as I said before, work-life balance is important for me. Even though I manage a real estate private equity firm, I try to be home every day in a reasonable time to be with the kids, for dinner, for bath time, for stories. So we start with caring for the family, and I'm a very active parent. I coach the soccer team for my son and for my daughter, and I'm very involved and engaged. So it starts with caring for your family, and then you start expanding the circle, right? You have to expand the circle. I'm active, very active in two organizations. I'm on the board of American Friends of Natal. Natal is the largest organization in Israel that deals with people suffering from PTSD, trauma that's, result of acts of war and violence, which unfortunately in Israel and in a lot of other places in the world is very prevalent. So I've been on the board for 5 years. We're actually having our annual gala this Thursday, and hope to see you there. And it's just a great organization. I got involved with it because the head psychologist for that organization was in the same squadron as a fighter pilot with my father. He got shot down and was a prisoner of war, and then came back and self-healed, and then used what he taught to help others. And that means a lot to me. And Natal now is unfortunately exporting that knowledge elsewhere. So in the US, they're training first responders. They're training priests in Chicago that deal with a lot of inner city youth violence from gang wars. When there were school shootings in Parkland in Florida, Natal sent teams there. So unfortunately, trauma is all around us, and Israel unfortunately has a lot of knowledge how to deal with trauma. So we're trying to export it, and it's the way for to help the organization that then helps so many other people. So that's one I'm very proud of, and I'm very passionate and very involved. Obviously, being an officer in the Army, seen my share of events and trauma, and it's very important. The other organization, together with my wife, we support is Unistream. Unistream supports and promotes entrepreneurship in the periphery of Israel and in the US. And basically, a lot of wealth has been created in the tech world. But unfortunately, it's being spread to a relatively small part of the population. And the goal is to go to high schools in peripheral locations and teach them about entrepreneurship and give them the tools. It's a 4-year program that's fully sponsored. And basically, these teenagers, and if you talk about Israel, in Bedouin camps and in Muslim parts, and obviously in Sderot and Beersheba and all sorts of places in Israel, in the US, in Rochester, New York, basically saying, what, there's this thing called a company, and you can form one, and let's talk about what it is to come up with an idea, and let's come up with an idea, and let's talk about how we develop it and how we market it. And you see these kids pitching all sorts of ideas, and how they get engaged, and it's such a huge success story. I mean, in Israel, 3,500 children every year go through this program, and then they go to either they start their own companies, but that's not the goal. The fact they were exposed, then they will go to work for Google or Facebook or another tech company, where their other alternatives would have been, I don't know, working in a body shop, right? So it's an amazing organization, and both of them have been up and running for many years now, and very happy to support them.
And I know you get your company involved as well, and I know some of the events that I've been at that you've hosted. You've had people from your organization there, and obviously that's something that I look at, and I look to you as a leader in that space of getting the people involved. I'm sure that helps the culture a ton as well. There's a meaning for everything at the end of the day. So that's something that always sticks out in my mind as being special.
The best advice I got, because when I started in the business, I had this perceived notion, okay, first work hard, create a wealth, then give, right? And what actually the founder of Natal told me is she told me, listen, start early, start small. You don't have to do big, you don't have to raise millions of dollars, but when you start giving, even on a small scale, and you don't have to give money, you give your time initially. It's really giving your time to support whatever cause talks to you. You start early, and it expands, and you don't have to wait to when you're 60 to give, right? And some people, I think, have that notion, especially young professionals. No, now in the grind years, I'm gonna have to grind first. I need to create for myself, to support myself and my family, which is all true. But we can always find some level of time to get engaged with something that's a bit beyond us. And we all live in this community, right? If it's our immediate community, or it's our city, it's our state, it's our country, and giving back is so important.
Great. So Ran, we got to wrap up soon, but before I wrap up, we're almost out of time. What final words of advice do you have for those business leaders tackling the myriad of business issues CEOs face on a daily basis? Maybe it's retaining key employees, outpacing the competition, earning customer loyalty, and building successful organizations. What's your final word or advice to them?
I mean, so many, but I'll listen to your team and listen to the immediate people around you. Don't be that type of CEO that's kind of secluded and thinks they know best. Doubt yourself, and probably the answer is somewhere in the organization to whatever it is you're tackling. And I'm still working on. I got to tell you, it's a constant work process to improve yourself, right? And to learn to listen more than you talk. And it's very hard for any CEO. It's very hard for me. You know, we all love the sound of our own voices, right?
Absolutely.
But listen to the immediate people around you, to your team, to your and to your loved ones, and you'll find the answer. And listen, it's going to be a tough ride. I think 2023 is going to be very challenging to a lot of businesses. I mean, we all see the cost of capital. We all see the reduced financial activity, the reduced buying activity. It doesn't relate to just real estate. It's all over industries, right?
Sure.
So
these are challenging times, clearly, and that's why it's so great to have had you here to share your insights with all of our listeners as well. And we'll continue doing this to share insights, with our contacts, our clients and stuff to help them through. So Ran, I can't thank you enough for the time you spent with us today. It's been a lot of fun and very enlightening. I truly wish you great success, and I look forward to many years working with you together and your company. To all of you, on behalf of Citron Koopman, many thanks for your time today, and I hope you found this session worthwhile, and you should have a great rest of your day. And if you want to learn more about Ran and Northwind, go onto the website, northwind.com, and we also have contact information for Ran as well. If you have any inquiries or you want to learn more about Northwind. Wishing everybody a wonderful holiday season and a peaceful new year. Take care, everybody.